Andean Abyss, Insurgency and Counterinsurgency in Colombia. This is a game that depicts the struggle of four factions in Colombia, and it depicts a military as well as political struggle in which these factions are trying to achieve different objectives. These factions are the government, the Marxist FARC, the paramilitary right wing, and the drug cartels. And of course, these factions are going to get in each other's way as they try to further their agenda and achieve their objectives. For factions, that means that this is an ideal four-player game. You can play with less player by assigning multiple factions to, say, 2 players. We have flowcharts here that regulate the action of non-player controlled factions, so you could also use that to control some of the factions when you do not have players available. Because of this, you can even play the game as a solitaire game by yourself. You're the government and you use these rabbits to control the actions of the other 3 factions. If you are trained in multiplayer solo gaming like I am, you can even consider just playing the game by yourself, controlling all 4 factions without the AIs, which is what I did. I used the AIs at the beginning just to get used to the general concepts of the game, the general strategies of the game, to figure out what the priorities of the factions are and what a possible course of action for each faction could be. After that, I just played all factions at the best of my possibilities. In any case, this is the picture. Let me show you how the game depicts this struggle. This game is card-driven, but not in the traditional sense like you see in other card-driven games. There is a deck of cards that are shuffled all together at the beginning of the game, and they're placed on the table in a single deck. Then throughout the game, there is always a card that is the active card, the one that takes place during the present turn, and then players are allowed to look at the next card, the one that will be resolved next, so that one is placed face up. When the current card has been resolved, then the previous one becomes the current one, and you look at the next one. Cards will tell you the order in which players have the opportunity and the option to execute an action. Only 2 players per turn are going to be able to execute actions on the board, and the order in which the eligible factions can act is indicated by these symbols here from left to right. So in this case, cartels first, AUC next, FARC, and government. And after you execute an action, you become ineligible for a turn, so in most cases there will not be 4 factions that will be eligible to choose from this list here. When you're eligible and you choose to execute an action, you can choose to execute the text of the action printed on the card, or one of the 2 actions available, or you can simply execute an operation in the list of operations that are available to your faction. Each faction has different possible operations. It is also possible in such circumstances to execute a special operation connected to the main one. There are just rules and sub-rules about this. I'm not going to get into detail here, or it would sound more confusing than it is. Shuffled in the deck, more or less equidistant from one another, are 4 propaganda cards. When one of these cards is resolved, a special turn takes place, a propaganda turn, during which players will go through all of these steps. First, the players check to see if any of the players has met the victory conditions. Each faction has its own victory conditions. Control, the government and the FARC check to see the areas on the board that they control directly, in which they outnumber all of their enemies. Resources, in which players receive resources depending on several circumstances on the board, how well they're doing. This is the phase in which the cartels will gain money from the shipments of drugs. Support is when the is when the government and the FARC have the opportunity to improve support for their factions. So the government may increase active support in direction of the government, and the FARC will try to increase the opposition. Resources need to be spent to do that, and special circumstances need to apply for a region to be able to, for a player to be able to change the level of support in a region. We deploy, the government may have to move units from an area that has become ineligible, forbidden to government units. Also, this is when the government has opportunity to relocate units, and then reset. Simply, all factions become eligible again, and you start playing again. You continue with the game, and turn after turn, card after card. The game continues like this until either during a propaganda victory check, one of the factions has met its victory conditions, otherwise it continues until the end of the last propaganda round. At that point, the winner is the one that has the best victory margin, that is, the one that is closest at that time to achieve his victory conditions. This is the board for the game. It shows a general map of Colombia, and also here you have the standard setup for the game. The map is divided in districts that can be divided by generic borders or by roads or pipelines, and those can also be used for transportation. Different types of terrain are showed, from forest, grassland, and mountain. When we have cities, of course, and as you can see at the beginning of the game, the cities are mainly controlled by the government player. The government player uses light blue and blue pieces. So the government player kind of controls the area in the middle of the board, but is surrounded by mainly Marxist red units of the FARC faction. In other areas of the board, there are a little more scattered yellow units representing the right wing, and also you have the green pieces representing the cartels that are more or less in this area, mainly trying to mind their own business and to make a lot of money through business. Players use different types of pieces. The government uses light blue cubes representing police and blue cubes representing troops. The other factions use cylinders that have a blank side on one end and a symbol on the other side. When that symbol is showing, that indicates that that faction is active, that faction is not underground, and now it can be attacked by the troops of the government. Guerrilla units will reveal themselves when they execute actions on the board, or otherwise the government will have to spend actions such as executing sweeps or patrols to be able to flip those cylinders to indicate that those units have been located within the region in which they were rumored to be. Each player also has bases represented by wooden discs, and each area can hold up to 2 bases. Bases are extremely important pieces because they can serve for a variety of functions. They can serve as rally points, they can help a player raise units faster than otherwise. The cartels can remove their bases from the board and cashing money because of that. Basically, they disassemble the base and they sell the stuff that was generated there. Also, areas have a square that can hold terror markers. When the factions execute terrorism, then terror markers are placed on the board. The effect is that terror markers will make it harder for the players to influence the political situation in the area, and the political situation is represented by support markers that go in that box there. And as you can see, actually you cannot see, but other areas have a similar box too. If there is no marker in that area, that means that the area is neutral. Otherwise, an area can be in active support of the government, passive support of the government, or similarly active opposition or passive opposition. Each player receives a player aid with a list of possible actions. Each faction has specific units, specific actions that are available to that faction only. and actions cost resources. Each has a cost here, and well, that means that you're spending resources as you execute actions, and you will also need to find ways to replenish your resources. You can, as the government, train units, that is, you add cubes to the board, or under certain circumstances you can use this action to raise political support. You patrol or sweep, they have similar effect, which is to locate enemy units, or you can assault, and when you assault, you simply remove an active guerrilla or base for each troop cube that you have in the department in which you're executing an assault. Bases must be removed last after you have eliminated all guerrillas that are defending a base. Under certain circumstances, after you perform your main operation, you may be allowed to perform a special activity. Special activities are, for the most part, free. The government can execute an airlift, allows to move units quickly. Airstrike allows to destroy an enemy unit, an exposed enemy unit. Eradicate, it allows the government to destroy bases belonging to the cartels, but as a secondary effect, it also raises political opposition in the area. We have the AUC that has standard insurgent operations. The three insurgent factions all have the same standard operations, but then they have unique special activities. The right-wing extremists can rally to add new troops on the board, or to move units and to make them inactive, quote-unquote invisible, underground again. Also, this is when a player can exchange guerrilla units for a base that is placed on the board. March, units are moved. Attack, the insurgents attack other factions. In this case, success is not automatic, like when the government attacks the insurgents. You need to roll a die, and to roll equal to or less than the number of guerrilla units that you're using in the attack. Terror, the insurgent faction executes terrorism to neutralize support or economic activity in the area. Then, in that case, you will place a terror marker on the board, and you will also shift the support opposition level towards neutral. The AUC can also extort as a special activity that allows to raise money. Ambush, it is pretty much an attack, but you don't have to roll for it. It is an automatic success. And assassinate, that allows to remove enemy pieces from the board. Insurgent operations for the cartels, they're the standard ones. Special activities, cultivate, that will allow the cartels to add bases to the board. Process, very interesting. This is when resources are turned into shipments of drugs, and the counters representing those shipments are placed on the board. These can be cashed in for quite a good amount of money during the propaganda round. That means that they may be on the board for a couple of rounds, and other players may try to steal them from you. Bribe, pretty simple and self-explanatory. You spend resources to remove up to 2 cubes belonging to the government, or to remove or flip up to 2 guerrilla units. And then we have the FARC, again, standard insurgent operations, special activities, extort and ambush. These are actually pretty much the same as for the AUC. Kidnap, similar, but in this case it allows the FARC player to transfer resources from enemy factions to his own faction. Victory conditions, the government is trying to reach a certain level of support. The FARC is trying to get enough support for their own part, which means opposition to the government, and a certain number of bases. The right wing is also trying to place bases on the board, and that's all they're trying to do. And the cartels are trying to make money and also, again, to establish bases on the board. Conclusions. This definitely is a serious gamer's game. It is a heavy game, it is a meaty game. The rules, while not long, are not particularly easy to absorb, but simply because there is just a list of pieces of information that you have to memorize, especially when it comes to the list of actions that are available to each faction. When I'm learning a game, say a war game. I'm learning a turn sequence, then I can sort of like catalog all of the pieces of information in different parts of the turn sequence. Here you do not have that type of organization, it's just a matter of memorizing the options. I found that a little hard at the beginning. This being said, the games comes with excellent player rates. Just expect to be perusing those player rates a lot during your first game. Of course, then you have the second level of learning, which is when you're trying to figure out what the actions are for, how you combine the actions and the synergy between your actions and the cards and the player's actions, and what are the ways in which you can use such synergies to achieve your objectives. The game may take a long time to play. I see how it can easily last 5 hours or more. As I've read, it has lasted for people that shared their experiences online. I played the game by myself in solitaire, so I took all the breaks that I wanted. I left the game set up over several sessions. I do not know that if you're playing the game with other players, it is going to be that easy to reconvene with the other 3 players every time, but this is just part of the design. It is a game that takes long to play. You can shorten it, you can definitely shorten it by playing with less propaganda cards and in the game earlier. That is an option too. So it is a game that has a little bit of a steep learning curve, may take a while to play, but is it worth it? Oh heck yes, it definitely is worth the investment of energy and time, because this is an excellent design. This is a design of abysmal depth. The abyss is not just in the title, it is definitely in the complexity and the amount of subtleties that the design has to offer. 4 factions that play in completely different ways from one another, different objectives, different strategies, different ways to achieve those strategies. Intense and continuous interaction. The map is not that big, there aren't many spaces. You will see that the map becomes quite crowded with pieces of all factions after a while, which creates a nice sense of claustrophobia. I know it's not a nice thing, but in a game it creates a sense of tension. Every game that you make, you immediately see that it gets surrounded by other factions that are trying to take it away from you, that are threatening it or pretending to be threatening it. But in any case, you are spending resources to build a defense there, while you're at the same time trying to expand your control over your possible objectives, and so on and so forth. You just have this sense of continuous pushing that the factions are doing against one another. Therefore, the game is quite confrontational. You directly go against your opponent. Fun, intense game, can be a little bit of a brain burner I found, but all good. All in all, this is an excellent game that may require a little bit of an investment from you, but to me this is an investment that is well worth making, because again, allow me to repeat myself, this is, in conclusion, an excellent game.